Hi everyone, this is Jesus Rodriguez-Espinoza and Steve Lalla from Orinoco Tribune. Today we will conduct a special interview with Yves Engler, who was recently imprisoned for his pro-Palestinian and anti-Zionist stance in Canada. Engler is a Canadian Montreal-based writer and political activist. In addition to 12 published books, Engler's writings have appeared in alternative press and mainstream publications such as The Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, Ottawa Citizen, and Ecologist. So welcome, Eve, and I just want to mention that you can count on us. I mean that you can count with our solidarity in your case, and I'm gonna jump especially to that particular issue. I want you to let us know about your imprisonment. Give us an update of your situation, the police treatment, your pro-Palestinian activities in Canada, and other cases, and maybe you can comment with us about other cases of police persecution against Canadians supporting the Palestinian cause.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me. 2 weeks ago now, I got a phone call from a police inspector, the Montreal Police, telling me that they were going to charge me for social media commentary in response to an aggressive anti-Palestinian Zionist influencer by the name of Dalia Kurtz. And I then wrote about this later that day that I got the phone call. Um, and uh, I There was an action alert where a few thousand people emailed the Montreal police that night and the next morning. And in response to this, the Montreal police decided I was now harassing the Montreal police. So initially they're saying I'm harassing a Zionist social media influencer who didn't even block me on X. I've never threatened her. I've never met her. I've never messaged her. All I've done is respond to her anti-Palestinian racism that appeared in my feed. I don't even follow her on X. And uh, and so now the police are saying I also was harassing them, and they were bringing in four charges, added four charges. Uh, Alongside this, when my lawyer called the police on the Tuesday to ask about the initial charges, the police said it was going to be about a 15-minute affair. I would go down to the police station, I would turn myself in, they would arrest me, I presume they would fingerprint me, and they would release me if I signed the conditions. Now, the conditions that they wanted to impose, one condition in particular was a problem. I was willing to not have any communication with the Dalia Kurtz, the person accusing me. But they wanted to bring in a condition that basically said I couldn't mention her name or effectively talk about my case. I wasn't willing to sign that. So ultimately, I went to the police station on the Thursday, and I spent 5 days in jail, all over a condition for my release, which I ultimately won, which said that I have the right to mention her name, I have the right to talk about my case, and the charges that are outstanding, nothing has moved on that file. That won't begin even for 2 months. But I spent time in jail to just defeat this condition, which was a success. But it was, of course, a fairly long period in time. Now, how does my case fit within the broader pattern? About a week before I was arrested, I spoke on a panel titled The New McCarthyism in Canada, which basically looked at the attacks against anti-genocide activism over the past 16 months. And there's lots of different examples. And since I've had my case, which made a certain amount of received a certain amount of attention, I've received all kinds of emails from people about similar type cases. And so, yeah, basically, there's been an effort to suppress challenges of Canada's complicity in Israel's genocide. And it's manifests itself in all kinds of different ways, from police raids and activist homes to probably the most egregious example of abuse of state authority is the listing of the Samidoun Palestinian Political Prisoners Network as a banned terrorist organization, and that happened about 3 months ago. As basically a grassroots group in Vancouver, and the government just decided it was a terrorist group. They don't even accuse them of any violence. They just say that they have connections to some link to the Popular Front for Liberation of Palestine, which they've already put on Canada's terrorist list, and so basically criminalized this grassroots Palestinian solidarity group. And yeah, so there's just many examples of this repression, and my case I think fits as just one of the latest examples of that repression.
Listen, and your stay in prison, how it was? Was it your first time? Was it something harsh? I mean,
Yeah, 20 years ago, I was involved in two different Haiti after the 2004 coup, where Canada, the US, and France overthrew the elected government and supported killing thousands in Haiti. I put fake blood on the hands of then Foreign Minister Pierre Pettigrew in mid 2004, and at a press conference, and I said that it represents the Haitian blood on his hands. Pettigrew lies, Haitians die, which also works in French. Pettigrew menteur, les Haïtiens meurent. So it was a good slogan. I got put in jail. I got detained for that, and I was in jail for I think a bit over a day and a half for that. Detained for that. The foreign minister ultimately dropped the charges, but about 5 months later, well, actually later, a bit after that, they brought in these conditions against me around the foreign minister. And about 5 months after that, there was an event that Paul Martin, Canada's prime minister, was doing right at the start of the election, the 2006 election, and we went to the event, and I ended up getting arrested and thrown in jail for 5 days. The actual Crown tried to keep me in jail for the whole election period, which would have been like 6 weeks. So I had been in jail one time previously in that would have been in 2000 and was that late 2005, I believe. So I was in jail for I think it was about 4 or 5 days as well. The conditions, as I remember them then, were a little bit better than the situation I was in. In that case, I was in a cell with one other person. This, where I was detained at the Bordeaux prison in Montreal, it was an open area with about 15 bunk beds, so I think about 30 people. There's about 17 there when at the high point when I was there, and about maybe 8 at the low point. Um, and the conditions were, I mean, I didn't find it like traumatic. In fact, a lot of people who were there with me, who had been to jail for longer in previous periods than I had been, they seemed to find it more traumatic than I did. It's boring. It's the food is not very good, but I'm not, a really picky eater. But it's not horrible either. You basically just mostly it's boring. You just sort of sit around. I got lucky and I found a pencil on the first night when I got to the prison after being in the detention center for pretty much the whole day. I found a pencil and that allowed me to write. And I didn't really understand how lucky I was at the moment. Another prisoner guy, kind of in charge of the in charge in quotes in my section, tried to take it from me, and then the prison guards sort of tried to take it from me as well. So, but I kept that pencil and I wrote a whole lot. So I had something to do. But no, there's not much to do. They don't. I wasn't able to talk to my lawyer. That was probably the most egregious abuse of my rights. They just, even though the judge mandated on the Friday from when I was in video court appearance, mandated to talk to my lawyer, they just completely refused. I asked multiple times. The guards, they just basically laugh at you. They just don't care.
okay.
And it wasn't a personal thing. I don't think they were doing that directed at me. It was across the board. Everyone else that was in the jail, the same dynamic where they basically weren't given access to a phone to talk to the lawyer or anyone else for that matter. Um, and uh, and so Yeah, I mean, there were a couple fights in the prison, so there's this certain degree of tension. I didn't feel like threatened in any way. I was in a like minimum security area, so it wasn't, I'm sure there's somewhere where people were there for 10 years. It's much more kind of bit more intimidation kind of going around, but that wasn't, I didn't feel that. The people I was with were some mix of people who were just in really dire straits. This one guy older man who shit himself and at one point he put his diaper on top of his pants. So he just like didn't even understand how to like actually put on his diaper. And this he was just clearly needed significant physical and mental care. I don't know what he was accused of or why he was there. We made just on the surface of it, it made absolutely no sense that this guy was there. I couldn't imagine the guy being much of a threat. Maybe I don't know, maybe he stole something. I really I had no idea why he was there. He was clearly needed significant support. And then there were a bunch of people in there who were like, my impression was they had been abused basically, and they abused their partners. I mean, not, they people who had very abusive upbringings and then had been, abusive to their, girlfriends or
Partners.
wives, whatever, right?
Yes.
So yeah, it's a pretty, it wasn't traumatic for me. It wasn't pleasant, but it wasn't traumatic. It was interesting. I'm happy to, I think it's important to have experiences like that in life and see, how the world actually works and it's messy and unpleasant and repressive elements, dynamics.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, Steve.
Can you tell us a little bit about the lawyer that brought these charges against you, who they are, their political affiliations, and so on?
Yeah, I think that gets to the real politics of this, or important element to the politics of it. And so what happened was on July 5th, this Dahlia Kurtz, who is this real extremist Zionist influencer, she puts this declaration. She quote tweets me and makes this declaration that says something to the effect of, uh, Eve, you are harassing me. Stop harassing me. I feel threatened. This is the last time I will say anything about it. Something like that. Okay. And um, I immediately understand that she's probably playing some sort of legal game. She's probably setting up some terrain. She doesn't block me, right? Okay. So the simple thing that if you don't want someone to respond to your posts on X, you can block them. And many people have blocked me. Many people have blocked, they're like blocking is not a particularly big thing. She's blocked other people. So I knew at that point, or I thought at that point that she was preparing some sort of legal kind of angle. She goes to Montreal police and they open a file in the summer and they close the file and basically decide that the evidence isn't there. Subsequently, this lawyer, Neil Oberman, who's running for the Conservative Party here in Mount Royal and sort of western part of the city of Montreal, or just outside of the city of Montreal, he's running for the Conservatives against Anthony Housefather as the more Zionist. Anthony Housefather is a Liberal MP who's very pro-Israel, and he's running as sort of the more pro-Israel direction. And Neil Oberman sends this letter to the Montreal police. They open the file back up, and then 2 months later, they charge me. I'm pretty sure that Neil Oberman assisted Dahlia Kurtz right from the get-go. That's my guess. Oberman was at my bail hearing. He was watching it online. You could see him on the screen. Dahlia Kurtz has subsequently gone after a senator, a Senate Ethics Committee, the Senator Wu, who supported me and criticized the case against me, and others. I'm presuming that Oberman is assisting in all of this process. And basically, Oberman has been the leading advocate, leading activist of lawfare in Canada over the past year. And he has pursued a mix of injunctions or sent threatening letters. Max Blumenthal, US journalist, he sent this letter because Blumenthal was writing about this woman who in Montreal who threatened Another woman who had a Palestinian flag threatened to rape her, or said she should be raped. He sent a letter to McGill, Oberman, the lawyer, sent a letter to McGill around Albanese, the special rapporteur, when she spoke at McGill in November, sort of this threatening letter. And he's instigated injunctions against a whole series of different anti-genocide, pro-Palestinian groups, activism. The one that received the most attention was the injunction he sought against around the McGill encampment in late April, the student encampment at McGill. And he sought this injunction that would have banned protests within 100 meters of 154, I believe it was, university buildings in Montreal, which McGill is right downtown Montreal, and they have buildings kind of like all over. So he would have basically banned not just Palestine protests, but like all protests of any sort within this huge swath of downtown Montreal. And so this Oberman character has been using his legal expertise, and they work with the CJA, the CJA, the Combined Jewish Appeal, the big main Jewish charity in Montreal, which is the sponsor of CJA, the main Israel lobby group in Canada. And they've been basically just harassing, mostly legally, but also just from the threats. And he's running for the Conservatives. And Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the Conservatives, has actually said that one of the reasons why Oberman should be sent to the House of Commons, why he should become an MP, is because of his legal work on as Poilievre put it, targeting the anti-Semitic mobs who've been opposing genocide. And so this is an extreme hostility to freedom of speech, extreme hostility to freedom of assembly, which are charter protected rights in Canada. And you have Oberman, I think, is kind of like personifies this authoritarian, even I would say fascistic element of this sort of pro genocide, pro Israel activism in Canada.
Yeah, you better watch what you say about him. I wanted to ask also, so much for the conservatives and the liberals who clearly go on supporting the genocide. As most of our viewers know, Canada has other political parties. Can you tell us maybe a bit about any political parties here that have spoken out against the genocide and in defense of Palestine?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to understand is Canada's been supporting Zionism and dispossession of Palestinians and Israeli violence in the region for, over a century, right? This is long standing. It's not about one political figure. It's something deeper into Canada's political culture. It's tied to Canada's association with the British Empire, association with the US Empire. It's tied to Christian Zionism. It's tied to Jewish pro-Israel campaigning and all kinds of different factors. So there's a whole political, deep cultural, political ethos going on. Now, in the Liberal government of Justin Trudeau has been decidedly pro-Israel from coming to office in late 2015, and it's over the past 16 months. You have Melanie Joly, the foreign minister, making solidarity trips, in her words, to Israel. You have the first few months of Israel's mass killing. You have Canada speeding up arms permits to Israel, getting it down to 5 days in terms of okaying new arms sales to Israel. You have the more underlying issues that we don't know much about, like the intelligence sharing between Canada and Israel. You have early on, you had Canadian military flights bringing Israeli soldiers that were out of the country back into, they were taking Canadians out and bringing Israeli soldiers back into Israel. So you have like all kinds of ways in which can, and then things like this, like the registered charities, hundreds of millions of dollars, about a half a billion a year, raised in Canada, subsidized by all taxpayers, sent to different projects in Israel, including some that support the Israeli military, West Bank colonies, etc. So you have this Canadian support for Israel, and Trudeau has mostly continued that. Under substantive pressure, 3 or 4 months in, he started talking about a ceasefire. They announced a sort of a partial arms permit. They weren't going to okay any new arms permits, but that's even complicated because most of the weapons Canada comes via the U.S. and Canada sending to the U.S. So it's a very partial kind of ending of new arms sales to Israel. And so that's going on. Then you have the conservatives who are even more pro-Israel, even more kind of hawkish. Now, what's happened, I would say, over the past 16 months of activism is that you've had a fairly substantive shift within the NDP, within the traditional Social Democratic Party, which is now very clearly far from what it should be doing, but very clearly and is rhetorically criticizing Israel's genocide and to a large extent criticizing Canada's support for that. Still haltingly, they still give way too much credence to these sort of manufactured like anti-Semitism scandals that the Israel lobby sort of will try to manufacture every so often, mostly very explicitly targeted against Palestine solidarity. But the NDP has sort of shifted to being critical of Canada's support for Israel's crimes, and yeah, so that's kind of like the political the lay of the land, if you like. And within the Liberal Party, there is division, right? The pro-Israel is really the dominant in charge, but there is division. There are MPs that are critical. No one's resigned. Some of the MPs should have quit over this, in my opinion. But there is some dissent within the Liberal Party. But the what we've seen is a remarkable popular uprising protest against Canada's complicity. I mean, it's weakened now, but there's never been a foreign policy issue where there's been more protests against Canada's support for international crimes than there has been over the past 16 months on Gaza. That I think is pretty clear. There's protests, weekly protests here in Montreal still. At the high point, there was 50,000 people in Montreal. Other cities, similar kind of numbers, and they were coming out, every weekend, and tons and tons of different actions, tons and tons of different disruptions, tons of so whatever, all petitions, all the different types of activism, and it's clearly broken through into popular consciousness to a certain extent, but the dominant media and the main political structures are still very much aligned with killing Palestinians.
Before we wrap up here, is there anything else you wanted to mention, Jesus or Yves, on this topic?
Yes, you mentioned Samidun, which is an amazing organization, but are you aware of any other organization or activist that has been, targeted by the Canadian state besides you?
Oh yeah, there's dozens, hundreds. I mean, the probably the most prominent example of it. Well, first of all, Charlotte Cates, who was coordinator for Samidoun, she had her house raided. She was arrested to taken off a bus a few months before her house was raided by the police in Vancouver. And then there's been all kinds of fallout from that and all kinds of targeting of Palestine solidarity people in Vancouver for any possible associations with Samidoun. So there's that. But the example that got the most attention is the Indigo 11. And so Indigo is the biggest bookstore in the country, and it's owned by Heather Reisman and Jerry Schwartz, and they set up something called the Hessig Foundation for Lone Soldiers about 20 years ago. And over the past 20 years, they've sent about $200 million to support non-Israelis joining the Israeli military. So some kid from Montreal, Toronto, Paris, New York, wherever, joins the Israeli military as a so-called lone soldier, meaning they don't have their family's not in Israel. And then the Hessig Foundation provides them bursaries for education, provides all kinds of different sort of incentives to join to become a lone soldier, to join the Israeli military. And so about I think it was in mid-November, about a month or so into Israel's mass killing in Gaza, there were posters put up at the main Indigo in Toronto, the flagship store, saying something like Reisman. I don't know, it was Reisman genocide. I forget what was actually on the posters, but it was just posters. They're just political posters being put onto the window of a bookstore. And maybe it was like a low level crime of some ticket or something like that. I think the posters easily came off. It may have cost the store $100 or $200 or something like that to remove the posters, but this is a inconsequential kind of misdemeanor. Anyways, the Toronto police would then raid the houses like early in the morning, send like 12 cops to 11 different individuals' place of residence, and all over this allegation of postering. And I don't know. I wasn't there. I wasn't involved. I don't know who did it, who didn't do it, all this stuff. I'm pretty certain that there weren't 11 people that put up posters. I mean, it takes maybe two or three people to put up. One person could do it even, but there's probably two or three people that were there actually putting the posters up. I don't know if the others are accused of having been involved in conspiring to plan to put up posters or whatever. But this is an incredible overreach by the police. They spent like huge amounts. It's as if there was like some big drug bust where they were busting down doors and this kind of stuff. And so that's the example. That's the most egregious. People lost their jobs over it. People, they were detained for hours and hours over this, again, allegation of postering. So that's the example that's received the most attention. But there's a woman in jail in Ottawa that I just learned about recently. It's not just on Palestine, but it's largely on Palestine, who's just been basically detained. They haven't been tried over breach of conditions. And that's part of what my battle is about. So I don't have these conditions, because once you have these conditions, then their ability to get you on breach is easier. But she's been in jail now for I think it was like 3 months already, and she's gonna be there for a while longer, just over breach of conditions. So yeah, there's been all kinds of targeting. There's 2 months ago in Ottawa, a number of individuals were arrested by the police because they took the street, and the police were saying you had to stay on the sidewalk in the protests. And so there's tons of examples across the country. There's tons of people, dozens and dozens of people. We don't know a full number of people who've been fired for like really minimal things. Like, there's one instance where there was a protest in Toronto that came by, and some restaurant workers, forgetting the chain now, that came out and just sort of clapped. They were like on their break, and they clapped for the protest. And the Zionists then launched a huge campaign against the restaurant chain, getting these people fired. I mean, it's just like tons of examples like that have transpired over the past 16 months. And it's a mix of some of it is this sort of organized Israel lobby kind of persecution of individuals, and some of it is the state authorities, the policing judicial apparatus, directly suppressing dissent.
Can you tell our viewers, please, Yves, where they can keep up with your case and with your work and the things that you do?
Yeah, yvesengler.com is my website, yvesengler.com. And I post my articles there. There's hundreds of articles there. You can sign up to receive the articles when each new article I post. I also do something called the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour, for about 3 years, a little bit more than 3 years now, which is a weekly kind of look at Canadian foreign policy every Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern. You can sign up for that on my website, and I'm on X, Facebook, other social media platforms.
Listen, Yves, and do you need financial support to deal with what is coming next in your case?
Yeah, people have been quite generous on that front. At this point, that isn't a priority. I think we're going to be doing some more actions actually on this Neil Oberman, the conservative lawyer that's been behind a lot of stuff. We're going to be doing some actions on that. If people are interested in supporting that, you'll probably see some of that on my website soon, an article coming. Also, the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute has a listserv, about 40,000 people on it. People can get on that listserv for more information on some of these campaigns going forward.
Well, thank you, Yves. Thank you, Steve. I just to wrap up, I wanna thank you for your time, and I wanna again let you know about the solidarity of Orinoco Tribune, of the Venezuelan people with you, and for accepting the invitation, of course. And we invite everyone to support you via reading what you do, or supporting you in the case you need financial help for your case. And of course, we also invite everyone to support Orinoco Tribune, that we also are always struggling with that. Un abrazo, Yves, and thank you.
Thank you, and thanks to all the great work that Orinoco Tribune has been doing.
Thank you, compa. Thank you.